Welcome to Pet Sitter Confessional, an open and honest discussion about life as a pet sitter. Today, we're brought to you by our friends at Time to Pet and the Peaceful Pet Music, Calm Music for Pets YouTube channel. Today, we are super excited to have Catherine, owner of Ladybug Pet Care, on the show to talk about her journey into pet care, how she takes care of her clients from beginning and all the way through the process of being a client with her, and then some of her biggest lessons over the years of being in business. Catherine, I'm really excited to have you on the show and get to talk to you about all this. For those who aren't following you on social media or familiar with your work, could you please tell us a little bit more about who you are and all that you do?
Absolutely. First of all, how dare you not follow me? Just kidding. So my journey, honestly, it kind of fell into my lap, to be completely honest. I was a nanny at the time, and the girl who cuts my hair, she cuts hair at her home, and she has dogs. So, of course, every time I went there, I got to snuggle dogs and play with them and everything. And one time she just reached out and was like, hey, if we ever decide to go out of town, would you want to come stay with our pups? And I was like, sure. And I didn't really think a whole lot of it, sure, I'd come over and hang out with your pups. And then about a week later, she sent me a text and said, hey, I've got a client that I'm doing hair for, and they're going out of town, and they usually board their dogs, but they didn't have a good experience last time. Would that be something you'd be interested in? I was like, sure, why not? And to this day, I still have my very first client is still my client, which is pretty cool. And then it honestly just snowballed from there. I had no idea there was a need for this type of thing, whether dog walking or, overnight stays. And it snowballed in about, I'd say 3 months in. I was like, I think I can do this full time. And so went from being a nanny to watching dogs, which not to compare children and dogs, but I have found there's a lot of similarities that I do, because I was in childcare for like over 20 years. So there's a similarity to how I go about my dog sitting business compared to when I was in the childcare field. And obviously I've learned a lot about the pet care industry along the way, but it surprised me how similar the childcare field and the dog sitting pet world is. So it was a cool transition, but very glad I made that transition.
or it sounds like your friend made that transition for you.
Yes, I would say kind of, like I said, it really just fell into my lap. There was no, like I said, I was a nanny at the time, so I knew at some point the boys would be going to school and my job would be done. But the pet care industry was never on my radar at all until she started suggesting this.
Well, and you mentioned the similarities there, and I think that's a very interesting part, because you were in some instances kind of already doing, it sounds like, kind of a lot of these things. So what did you bring from your time as a nanny into your business?
I think the biggest point for me was when I go to meet a new client, I'm myself. I tend to be a little more laid back. I want them to feel comfortable, because obviously I'm going to be in their home probably when they're not there, as well as taking care of their pets, which we all know are family members. And that's kind of how I viewed when I was a nanny. I wanted, obviously, if I'm watching your children, that's important. And I want people to trust me and to know that, I can keep your kids safe. But at the same time, I want you to know me personally, because again, if I'm watching your kids, you're probably not home. So I'm in your home by with your kids. So I found that when I go on meet and greets now for pet care, I'm the same way. I want people to know who I am, know my personality, feel comfortable with me coming in and out of their homes. And I was like, we were talking about earlier, garage codes and key codes. People are trusting me with those. So I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a very professional person. I tend to be very like what you see is what you get. I'm more, uh, I can be kind of goofy and silly, but I want people to know that about me, as our relationship with their pets and with me grows.
That is, we do have to decide what kind of tone we're going to
Yes.
have as a business. And
Yeah.
you said, I'm not a professional person, but that can mean so many different things.
Yes.
Like certainly there is the, someone who arrives with a clipboard and is very crisp and, has an iron shirt. And,
Right.
if they, who owns an
That is
iron
not
anymore,
me.
right? Like, but like,
I mean, I'm not going to show up in sweatpants, but I am not the like suit, clipboard, very rigid, like let's go off the
yeah,
checklist type person. I tend to just, for a meet and greet, I show up and just see where the conversation goes. Obviously, we have to like go over certain things.
sure.
But I tend to be a very laid back person.
Well, and that is a decision that we have to consciously make of because that is going to attract and it's also going to put off potential
Hmm.
clients, right?
Hmm.
And so we have to know going into this, when we talk about being ourselves, like that is included. How
Yep.
do we present ourselves to our clients? How do we talk? Where do we show
Yes.
concern? How do we budget our time? All that's going to be picked up on by the client and is going to tell them whether we're a good fit for them or
Yes.
not, right? And that's so important to know that we may feel, and sometimes we kind of feel like, oh, I can't be myself. I've got to
Hmm.
do this, a certain way and blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah. But then, we'll be dissatisfied with the kind of people that we're
Yes.
working with. And we're not being true to who we are.
Yes. And you don't want to be uncomfortable in a
Mm,
situation, with a client. Like there's certain clients that I know that I can send a picture or video of their dog and put a really silly, goofy comment with it, and they're going to think it's hilarious. And then other times with clients, I'll just send a picture and a video. I'm like, oh, we're enjoying our walk today, or oh, we got dinner today, that kind of thing. So there's certain clients that you kind of figure out along the way of like who I can be like I said, take a picture and send a silly comment with it, or one where you just send a picture and you're like, we ate lunch today.
yeah, because we don't want to present in one way, market one way, and
Yeah.
then them think we're something. Right? And
Yes.
then our updates are all goofy, off the wall, funny, silly stuff with emojis on everything, and they're like, "Who is this?
Yeah.
Who is this
Who is
person?"
this
Right?
lady?
Yeah.
Why is she at my house right now?
Be- because then like you said, then we can be more relaxed in what we do too. We're not
Yes.
having to sit there and go, right, what's the language that I have to use and how did I do this and blah
Yes.
blah. It becomes much more enjoyable
It
at
does.
that time. And you're right, there are those clients. We have them too, where I'll be doing a visit and it's like, well, my humor says to do XYZ, but knowing what I know about this person, I don't think I
I know
can
I need
word that. Right.
to word it differently or scale it back a little bit, something like that.
Yeah, we had someone who was very literal in their thinking, and we were walking and we had found, so it looked like somebody had dumped a bucket of fish heads on the side of the road. And so we said we had came across a pile of fish heads and
Mhm.
something, and she called me and she was like, "Is that slang for something?" And I was like, "Oh no, it was a
No, it's a literal
literal pile of
bucket of
heads
fish.
of fishes." And she was like, "Oh, okay, cool. I just."
And then you're sitting there like,
Yeah. Well, then I had to go, is that slang for something? Like, should
right,
I?
yeah. And then you're like, well, maybe I. What are these kids saying nowadays?
Right. But all, but all that is really tied up into when we talk about like customer service. It's
Mhm.
serving, sure, our clients how we want to be, how they need to be served, but also we have to stay true to ourselves in how we're serving them too.
Yes. And I think that makes a big difference too when you can, obviously, again, you're providing a service, you're a business, but when you can also be yourself, um, I think that makes your job a little more enjoyable.
Mm,
Because I know, like for me, again, I'm not someone who can go into like an office and sit at a computer and do that kind of thing. Bravo to those people who can. I appreciate those people. So the fact that I get to be out and about and walking around and being active and staying busy, that makes me love my job even more. So, people are always like, oh man, you work 7 days a week. I'm like, yeah, but I like it.
Mm.
I enjoy it. It's fun. And not that it doesn't get to be tiresome sometimes, but I know that there's an old saying, when you do what you love, you're not really working. And that's how I feel.
And it can sound so cliche,
Yes.
but those are said for a reason
Yeah.
sometimes. And
Yep.
and genuinely in this, when we get to first, we get to run our own business, which means we get
Hmm.
to decide a lot of the parameters and a lot of the boundaries and a lot of the
Yep.
hows and don'ts. It means that we really do get to be more authentic to ourselves
Hmm.
and get to show up and go, you know what? Not only am I doing something that I love, but I'm doing it the way I love doing it. And it's
Yes.
those processes that too often we can kind of do a big grab bag of what's everybody else doing. What's
Hmm.
let me just post on Facebook and get the latest SOPs and that's what I'll do.
Hmm.
Instead of really internalizing that and thinking, but for me, like what would be my version of this?
Yep. Exactly. Yes.
And that takes time, right? It does have to mean
It does.
we have to be honest with ourselves about how we operate too.
Yep. I mean, I'm about 5.5 years in, and I'm still figuring out certain things, especially that I know every pet sitter says this, the work-life balance. I tell myself I'll get there eventually. Um, but it takes time. I can't say I came January 1st, this is going to happen, because you never know what your schedule is going to end up looking like. There might be things that originally you said, oh, I'm never going to do that. And then you're like, well, maybe I'll do that. And it's also, um, I think it's a learning experience. You do certain things, you're like, I don't like doing that. Some
Mm.
people don't do overnights, or some people don't do weekends, and that's fine. That works for them. So I think this is a really cool industry to um, figure that out along the way and learn what you like, what you don't like, and what works for you in your business.
Well, so what is that process like for you? 5.5 years in, finding those boundaries, but then sticking to them. Do you have the magic pixie dust to help us all make that work, Catherine?
I started part time in 2019, and then obviously shortly after that, COVID happened. And Ohio opened up, I believe, in like June of 2020, and things. And I'm sure a lot of pet sitters have said this, exploded because everyone wanted to go, everyone wanted to do things. And in 2021, I only took 7 days off for the entire year. And I didn't realize it until the end of the year, when I felt, I'll say it, I was burnt out. And so I told myself that can't happen again. I
Mm.
can't work 350 something days a year. Nobody can do that. So that's been the biggest, I guess, lesson, and coming up with a way to figure that out. And every year I take a little bit more time off, because really most people work Monday through Friday. So you get Saturday and Sunday off. That's 96 days a year that people get off just on weekends. I take about 30 days off a year. So I'm still not anywhere near where I probably should be. Um, but after, working weekends, working nights, working holidays, I'm slowly starting to figure out, like, next year I'm taking Christmas Eve day and the day after off, and that's going to be an annual thing for me.
Nice.
So it's learning things like that, where you're like, oh no, I can work weekends, I can work holidays. And then after a while, you're like, you know what, I can't, or not every year. I can't keep doing that every year, because you're missing out on things. And um, I I'm trying to think of where I saw this, but it was a fellow pet sitter, and she said, "I want to run the business. I don't want the business to run me."
Hmm.
And I was like, "That is dead on how it should be." And for me, I think, and maybe some people, it's fine. Um, I think it's harder than people think to say no. especially when you're running the business, when you're the face of everything. You don't want to, ooh, if I say no to this client, are they going to like never use me again? Are they going to get mad? Are they going to like tell their neighbors, oh, don't use her? But I think at some point you do learn, like you said, you have to have those boundaries. You have to have those, you have to do what's best for you, because then you're not going to be able to show up for your clients if you're working 365 days a year.
Well, and that starts with valuing ourselves, doesn't
Yes.
it? Like you brought up that stat of, yeah, if you had a normal Monday through Friday job, you'd get 96 days off a year.
Yeah, at the minimum.
Right. And so going, oh, well, am I worth that? Like if that's what people get, like can I make that work for me? Am I
Yes.
worth that amount of time off? What would
Yeah.
that look like in my business? And then we do have to back solve, right? And go, okay, well, if that's true, maybe I need to adjust my prices so that I, buy $1 or $2 so I don't need those extra visits, or maybe I just do my start and stop times different.
Yeah.
Because what we've found is, even when you go, oh, I didn't work that much today, maybe I only have like 2 or 3 visits because it's a really light day. Well, that still interrupts your time. It still keeps you from doing things that you
still
didn't
work.
want to. Still working. Your mind is still engaged. You're not able to relax and focus on other stuff. It's still keeping your focus and attention. And that's the biggest thing that I've really felt of, where is my attention today? Not really necessarily what am I doing?
I totally agree. I mean, today I only had 3 appointments. But all of a sudden I looked at the clock and it's like evening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what did I do today? But it's not just like the appointments. You drive to the appointments and then you drive to the next appointment, and there's traffic or there's an accident and things get backed up. And you're like, oh, well, since it's my easy day, I'll run to the grocery while I'm out, or I'll go pick up this and that. And then before you know it, it's the end of the day, and you might have only, quote unquote, worked 3 appointments, but your entire day is done.
Yeah.
And then you got to do it all over again.
Yeah, it's amazing how much that just eats into everything and pulls you away from that stuff. And so having those lessons of going, like, you looking back going, I had 7 days off and I feel terrible, right?
Yeah.
We reach that point where we go, I don't want more of that. And I don't want another decade or 2 decades of only 7 days off each year. So what do I have to do?
No, you can't. And I mean, if you feel like you can, God bless you, but I don't think anybody should be working. You have to take that time off, whether it's just one day or you're like, I'm taking a whole week off, whatever you need. You have to, because you got to reset yourself, and you need time to just plop on the couch, or, go to the gym, or whatever it is that you do to unwind and not think about work, or not have to bill clients or work on your schedule or anything like that. You got to have that separation, which I think can be another lesson that you learn when you get into this industry, because again, it's so easy to get caught up in the 7 days a week, because people need pet care 7 days a week. And it can get away from you. At least, I mean, for me, it did for a while. And like I said, I'm still, I don't think 30 days is enough off. So I'm still working on that, but it can sneak up on you really fast.
Have you heard of Time to Pet? Susan the Pet Gal has this to say.
Time to Pet has helped us grow exponentially. We believe the platform's features make us by far more professional than other companies who use conventional dashboards. They are the software gurus, constantly developing and improving the platform based on user feedback. This decision was a good one.
If you're looking for new pet sitting software, give Time to Pet a try. Listeners of our show will save 50% off your first 3 months by visiting timetopet.com/confessional. Yeah, so we use employees. We have employees that work for us. And I was just speaking to one doing a review about their time over Thanksgiving.
Right.
And they had said, I didn't even realize how busy we were until after I had looked up kind of the week after. And I looked back at my schedule.
Yes.
And that was insane.
Yes.
And that's exactly. And when he said that, I was like, you're right. Like, we get so head down, so focused. And that's a good thing, right? We're like, okay, I'm working now. I'm ready. Like, I'm engaged. But then it never stops. This is a
Yes.
365-day-year machine that
Yep.
just chews through our time, attention, our physical ability, and our mental bandwidth. And
Yeah.
then finally, when we can, wrench our eyes up, we go, "Oh my God,
What did I just do?
what in the world just happened?" Yeah.
And I found a lot of times too, because I'm old school. I don't use like an app or software or anything. I have a physical calendar that
Okay.
I
Yeah.
write my schedule in. And sometimes when I've noticed this too, I'll be writing my schedule out and it doesn't look like a lot on paper. And then when you get into the day, you're like, holy, why did I do this? Like, how
Mhm.
did this, you look on it on the paper and you're like, well, this isn't going to be too bad. And then all of a sudden it's like a 12, 15-hour day. And you're like, that was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's oh my gosh. Yeah, we still so we use a software, but we'll still use a pen and paper to
Hmm.
outline stuff. And
Yep.
it just helps me to see things physically. But you're right,
Yes.
even then, and it's even worse when it is just a flippant little digital thing on your phone. You're like scrolling, you're like, oh,
That doesn't look bad.
these little bars are meaningless to me. I have
Yeah.
no idea. And then you're right. You got there, and I've done it time again where I go, wait, when am I eating lunch? Wait,
Right.
what happened? Uh-oh.
Do I get a bathroom break at all?
And and so it is part of that trial and error. And you've said
Yep.
a couple times, Catherine, like, yeah, if that's you, like, go for it. If that's what you're able to do, and that's what we get to do is learn what am I
Yes.
capable of, but not just what's my max, but like where am I comfortable? What's going to keep me
Yes.
doing this from day to day?
Yes. Because I think a lot of people, you're used to the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So you kind of like take the weekends for granted. You get the holidays off, you get vacation, all that. So when you start in this business, you're like, well, that's just what I'm gonna do. Like that's how it's gonna be. And then you quickly realize that no, people need dog, cat, hamster care Monday through Monday.
Yeah.
So, if you don't, again, at least for me, if I don't stay on top of it as much as I can, I definitely overdo it. So that's something I've been working on too. When somebody's like, "Oh, can you watch my dog, July 1st through the 5th?" I don't I take my time with saying yes or no. I look at my schedule. I look at, do I have anything personally that I want to do that time? And if it's not, and if I have even the slightest little like, "Ooh, I could fit them in, but it'd be a lot," then it's a no. It's a
Mm.
no. And I've learned that the hard way of like, "Oh yeah, I can squeeze you in." Then you're like, I shouldn't have squeezed you in.
Yeah, doing that. What did I do? What am I doing the week before? And what do I need
Yeah.
to do the week after? Right. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that's so good because you're going, am I just coming off like a really intense, crazy
Yeah.
period and I'm eating into my only break? Or am I about to go into a really insane period? So I'm pushing
Yes.
this up even further
Yeah.
and really having a full, like, a holistic view of not just these specific dates or this specific time, but
Hmm.
what is the context around that?
Yes. Not just like you said, not just looking at that little like, oh, they need care on Wednesday, but what does your Monday and Tuesday look like? What does your Thursday and Friday look like? Because I
Yeah.
know for me, like there's certain months out of the year that are just insanity. So, and I tell myself, I'll go on those in those months, but then the month after, I'm not going to go. I'm going to back off. I'm going to enjoy some like downtime, so I can mentally and physically prepare for the next go.
One thing that I've been much more in tune with the past couple years was even just like seasonally
Yes.
going, okay, I just booked 5 evening visits in June. Well,
Hmm.
for some reason, I'm really energized. And by the end of that, I'm ready to go. 5 evening visits in the middle of January is just like the most brutal thing. And it's because it's been dark for 7 hours by then.
Yes.
And mentally I'm tired and I'm really worn
Yeah.
down. So even being aware of seasonal differences of how our bodies are going to be feeling will help this. So we know when to take lighter loads or to take more on so that we are in tune with what's going on.
I agree because I feel like most of the time, again, I'm a creature of habit. I like routines and schedules. So my brain about round around like 2 o'clock starts to kind of unwind for the day.
Yeah.
And then by like dinner time, I'm like, so I know that for me, scheduling those late visits, unless it's like, got to do it, I'm more inclined to say no, or, hey, I can come at this time, but not past, whatever time, because I can't function after that.
Well, so during this process, Catherine, did you ever consider hiring or bringing somebody on for your business? And what's that thought process been like?
I did, especially again after everything opened up after COVID, and there was this explosion. And I really went back and forth with the hiring, the not hiring, because I was like, I don't want to do all this. And I went back and forth, hemmed and hawed, made pros and cons. And ultimately, I'm still a solo sitter. And that's because, one, again, I don't have a website. I don't use technology. I don't have apps. It's basically like you have to find me in order. It's really mostly my clients are usually the ones that are like, hey, my neighbor or, my aunts or whoever. And if my client's recommending you, I'm going to assume that you're good. So I think hiring for me would just put more stress on myself, because I know when I go to a client's house, I know what's going on and I know how I'm doing it and I know things are taken care of and it's done this way and all that. I think I'd have probably a little trouble relinquishing some control, because I would assume and hope that if I hire you, you're going to go do the job and you're going to do it the right way. But I also don't have a camera on you to know that. And two, if somebody, I hire somebody and they're like, oh, call me, just before, oh, I'm sick, I can't come in. And if I'm working and they were supposed to work, well, then what? So I just started playing like all these, like, God forbid, things that could happen. And ultimately I was like, you know what, I'll just stay solo and I'll continue to work on getting that schedule to, like I said, that work-life balance where I need to. And if that takes a couple more years, then that's okay. For me, and God bless those people who hire and can dish out and keep track of everyone. I can barely keep track of myself. So the idea of like keeping track of a couple of people and did you do that and how did that go and did you go there? It was too exhausting. So ultimately I decided solo was for me. And if that means, like I said, if that means I have to continue over the years to narrow down my schedule and work-life balance to where, eventually I'm like, yeah, that's the stuff, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's about building what you want, and I think there is a misconception that if you stay solo, you'll never get a break and you'll never get a vacation again, right? And I know many who are actively taking cruises all of the time and who are actively, and it's their full-time, and pet sitting is their full-time thing. And it's because they've priced accordingly and they've said yes to the right type of clients. Right? The kind of clients who, when you say, no, I can't do that because I have a break, they go, oh, good for you. Great. Do you need anything? And
honestly, every single one of my clients are like, good for you. You earned it. You deserve it. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I do. You're right.
and those clients sound like unicorns, right? They do. But when you are able to have a personal, genuine connection with them, and that starts with us being authentic and starting off on that right foot, like we talked about, Catherine, people will see, okay, this is somebody who I am working with. I'm not just hiring to be a body doing this, that this person has value and expertise that I need in my life, and I need them well, right? It's really that simple, where somebody goes, okay, yep, I understand. And and too often we can look at our client list and our client roster, and we do this from time to time, and you'll scroll and you'll be like, do any of these people even, like, do they care, right? Or am I just here to serve them? And that doesn't happen by accident. Or I will say it does, right? We just unintentionally say yes to everybody instead of really screening for those kind of people.
I think that's a big one too. And I get, like, when you first start out, obviously you have to build clientele. So you need to say yes and get yourself out there and everything. But what I've noticed too, like I said, I still have my very first client ever that I had. I just did an overnight for them back in October. So I've had the majority of my clients have been with me since day one. So I've seen their kids grow up. I've seen them have kids. One of my clients just gave birth over the weekend.
Oh.
I've seen their dogs and cats grow up. So it's kind of, again, it would be nice to hire or to have a backup, but I enjoy, and that's part of why I don't like use software apps or anything, because I enjoy that interaction, because some of my clients, I'm in their house every day, but I haven't seen them in years, So I'll come in, I'm like, ooh, look at that. They got a new couch, but like, I haven't seen them in 3, 4, 5 years.
Yes.
So, but I enjoy that, even if it's just a quick text where I send them a picture and be like, oh, look, we went on a walk today. I enjoy that interaction with them, because it's still, I might not see them all the time. So that little interaction when I'm over for a walk or a potty break or something, that still keeps us engaged, and that still keeps our relationship, I guess, afloat.
Yeah, I was just speaking with somebody the other day where they have been taking care of literally the same client for over 20 years.
Oh.
And I was like, like business goals, right? Like and like that, how amazing is that relationship?
Wow.
How wonderful. What have they been through? How much trust is there?
That's like inviting you to like Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
Relationship.
Well, and then you said, and we don't see them ever. And I'm like, right. Yeah. Like 20 years and you've never, like, you've probably, seen them in person like 3 times. I don't know. But like, they see, it'll happen where we live in kind of a smaller community. And so we send selfies of us with the dogs, with the cats, with everybody. And somebody will say, oh, they'll recognize us from the selfies we send. Yes. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but glad. Yes, you're welcome. Right.
That is the same thing with me. I'll be out on a walk or whatever. And I'll see other people in the neighborhood walking their dogs around the same time. So I start I'm like, oh, that's Bob. Like, hey, Bob, how's the wife? And I don't even know Bob. But because I walk so-and-so's dog at the same time he walks his dog, we end up like chit-chatting or whatever. And that too, I mean, I will admit I'm an introvert, but I think everyone, even if you are an introvert, you need a little something. You need a little interaction. And I do enjoy the fact that I can go all day and just snuggle dogs and all that and not have to deal with people. But those little interactions that, you see Bob out with his dog and you'd be like, hey, Bob. I like that. I think that's a cool part of this job.
Well, and that personal touch too that you mentioned of keeping that relationship genuine, and going, I am thinking long term, right? And as we should be anticipating, how will I serve this person for decades? Like that really changes how we approach things, and even what we choose to invest in as far as our training or our relationships or our time, when we start thinking in decadal time blocks and going, I want to serve not just this dog, but this owner's next dog, and then their next dog, and then maybe
cool.
How like
cool that be?
It'd be so that's going to be so amazing to have those people, and imagine them cheering you on and them seeing you progress and seeing you succeed.
I mean, if you have a client for 20 years, like, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
You're doing something right there for that family, because obviously it's not the same pet. I mean, I would love it if our dogs could last 20 years. But for them to repeatedly come to you, say, hey, we need your services for 20 years. That's goals.
Yeah. It is really hard. We've had a small handful of clients who had a dog that passed away, and then there was a little interim, and then we get a little message that says, hey, we'd like for you to come over and meet so-and-so. And man, those are some of the sweetest things
it is
to be able to do when you're like, oh my gosh, like, here, let's go. Like, I'm so excited for you. And you're reaching out to me for your new journey. And that means so much.
It is, because especially this year, I've had about 6 or 7 clients lose a pet this year.
Mm.
And it's so, I mean, it is so hard, and I'm trying to be like, supportive for them when they're going through this, but on the inside, I'm like hysterically falling apart right there with them.
Yeah.
Because you've watched this dog or this cat, or I don't care if it's a hamster or a fish, you've watched this pet over however many years. And we all know what that feels like to lose a pet. So to watch somebody else go through it, it's just, it's hard. But then, like you said, when they reach out after that, whatever that time frame is for them, and to be like, hey, we just brought Spot home. Would you be interested in starting up again? Oh, it's so exciting for them and for you. It's kind of like starting a new relationship.
Yeah.
Because the pet's new. But at the same time, you're familiar with the home and the client, and you know what they like and what they don't like. It's a really cool industry to be in. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
It is, because not only do we get to make it our own, but we do get to be with people through all stages of their life, right? And that is a promise that we get to make to them of, I'm here through thick and thin. Right? I'm not just going to disappear when the summer's over or whenever winter breaks on, or I'm not just going to disappear whenever it's inconvenient for me.
Right.
I'm taking you on. It's a commitment. Like, we are going to be this together. And that is a journey that we go on with them. For clients who reach out to you, or you get a client referral who says, hey, why don't you go check out Ladybug? They've been helping me out a lot. What is that like, bringing in a new client, and how do you make sure that they know kind of, the expectations and what that's going to be like?
I will say because I'm a solo sitter, I've had to put the brakes on new clients for a while.
Okay.
But typically, again, like I said, people have to find me to get my services. So typically it is a client referral, someone's parents or someone's neighbor, which is pretty cool, because then I have a couple of clients I have probably about 5 clients that live in the same neighborhood. And it's kind of been like a domino effect. Like, I started out with one person, they were like, oh, hey, our neighbor now has a dog. Can you? I'm like, okay. And it trickles around like that. It's just a really cool experience to know that your client trusts you enough to put your name out there to somebody else. Because obviously, if you sucked, they probably wouldn't go about telling the neighbor, like, hey, yeah, use this lady, she's terrible. Yeah. So to know that they have enough trust in you to give your name out to somebody else, and this isn't like braggatory or anything, but that makes you feel good. That makes you feel like, okay, I must be doing something right in order for me to be gaining more clients like that.
A lot of pet owners don't know how to react when their beloved pet is faced with a bout of anxiety, noise sensitivity, or depression. However, various studies have shown that animals react very positively when calming music is played for them. As a trusted pet sitter, have your clients check out the peaceful pet music, Calm Music for Pets on YouTube, where they can give their pet the best chance at relaxing while they're away. From peaceful melodies to soothing nature sounds, this YouTube channel is the go-to spot when your client's pet is anxious and you don't know where to turn. Complete with beautiful and vibrant animations, their videos will become your home for the tools needed to keep the client's pet in a state of peacefulness. Be sure to subscribe to the Peaceful Pet Music, Calm Music for Pets on YouTube, and hit the bell so you never miss a moment of calm. Again, it's very honoring, right? That is it's an immense honor that somebody thought your services were amazing enough. They thought high enough of you to tell one of their friends, or to go out on because we often forget how big of a thing that actually is. Yes. I think that's what you're touching on of this person is basically saying, by my reputation, I recommend this person over you.
Yes. Yes.
Like it is a huge risk. And I've seen it time and time again, just, within family or between friends where they recommend somebody because they had a good experience, but the person they recommended to had a bad experience and it was actually ended up terrible. Like it is such a risk, a personal risk to me to say, use this person for your problem. Yeah. And we can become like, oh, why don't people recommend me, or why don't, but it's hard. It's really hard to do that for somebody.
It is. This was probably back in 2022, I think. I got an email, and again, me being a solo sitter, I don't really, like I've said before, I don't really like advertise myself. But I got this email, and my very first thought was like, haha, like what a joke. But I'm guessing it was probably one of my clients. I don't know. They don't tell you, but I was nominated for Business of the Year in my town. Mm-hmm. And again, I read the email. I was like, haha, like, is this like spam or something? Yeah. And no, it was real. And I mean, I didn't win. I went up against these huge businesses in our town. But just the fact that somebody, again, I'm assuming it's one of my clients, thought so much of me to write into our chamber to nominate me. I'm humbled at the fact that they think that much of me. When I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm just walking their dog, or I'm just feeding their cats. But obviously that means more to them than to just, oh, you're just walking my dog, you're just feeding my cat. There's more to it, because obviously if you have a pet, that's a family member. Yeah. So it's more than just feeding the cat or taking the dog out to potty. And I took, again, that nomination as like a little pat on the back.
It does mean so much to our clients, and we often don't get insight into that of we say, oh, what pain points am I solving, or how am I making your life better, blah, blah, blah. But people use us for whatever reasons that they need, and we are valuable to them that they continue to use us, and we should not take that lightly, right? And
no, not at all.
We should never get to the point where it's just an expectation. Okay, well, whatever, because people's lives change, and they don't have to use us. They can do something else, and yet here they are.
There's a cheaper pet sitter out there. There's the neighborhood kid. There's the college kid home for summer. There's, you can go on WAG, you can go on Rover and probably find the $10 dog walker. But they're continuing, like you said, they're continuing to come back to you, even though maybe your prices are higher than the neighborhood kid or something like that. But it's because you're worth it to them. They know that you're doing what you should. I've heard some horror stories about, teenagers and the neighborhood kids and the college students, like, quote unquote, taking care of the neighborhood's pet. And that's not really what's going on. Yeah. So that's unfortunate. But when a family can find a legitimate pet sitter who does it for a living and is going to show up and do exactly what that pet needs, what you expect, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. And we do often forget about those kind of experiences that people may have and why they come to us. I know I did a meet and greet one time and everything was going well. And we get to the feeding part and the person started to get kind of tense and nervous. And then they turned to me and they said, so to be completely honest, the last person we hired do this literally would just come in, they cut open the bag of cat food and dumped it on the floor and they left. And they just stared at me, and I'm sitting here. It's just like
you're mortified,
mortified that somebody would think that was okay, and it scarred this person, like genuinely left them horrified, because then the person just never showed up for the rest of the 4 days. And it's like too often we can think of like, well, obviously I would never do that. That's just complete out of the.
I can't fathom.
I can't fathom that happening, and then this person standing there looking at me basically going, are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Are you going to do that to this? And people, I can become kind of cold to that side of things, because I go, well, we would never do that.
Right. Why would I do that? Yeah.
And people do get hurt, and we have to be able to say, that's below our standards, right? That's completely unacceptable. But it's not just the words, it's then the follow through, because I guarantee you that person hired didn't promise them, I'm just going to cut the bag of food open and throw it on the floor. Right?
I think I'll just come over once and I'll rip the bag open. Is that good?
Right. We have to get in there and prove it's a show and tell, and then tell again, and then show again, and then show again. And then when that trust is there, that's what keeps them there.
Yes, I agree. And sometimes I'll even still, again, 5.5 years in, I'll, if I'm taking care of a client's dog and they're out of town or something, and even if like the slightest, like they're outside to go potty and, their dog, it wasn't quite diarrhea, but it wasn't like, I'm going to tell you that, even if it probably doesn't mean anything, or, hey, your dog got sick. He seems fine, but I want to let you know in case you notice something when you get home, and that's not something that the kid who's going to rip open the bag and leave is going to do. If he sees throw up, he's going to pretend like he didn't see it.
Yep. Yep. Communicating quote unquote bad news is never good. But as I remind myself and as I remind other people all the time, that's one of the reasons they hired us, was to communicate that stuff, to be in tune enough, to be professional enough, to be educated enough to know when something is worth and should be communicated to the client. That's part of the peace of mind that they're getting. Not just that we're going to feed them, it's when something goes wrong.
Yes.
That's part of what we do too.
And I'd rather, these people are always like, oh, do you want me to like leave notes? Do you want me to like tell you? I was like, you leave me everything you think. I'd rather have too much information than sit there and be like, what do you want me to do? And so that's kind of how I think of things too. I'd rather send a picture and be like, oh, you know what? Spot's poop. It wasn't quite runny, but it wasn't solid. Let you know. Because I don't want them to come home and be like, oh my God, Spot had diarrhea all over the couch. Like, did you notice anything? And then you're like, well, I probably should have told you.
well, actually, for the past 2 days, I did, right? I know you mentioned some of the, you're taking care of dogs and some cats and stuff too, Catherine. What for where you're serving? What's kind of the market asking of you, and how are you finding the best way to serve your clients there as far as the services that you do?
I noticed pretty quickly, overnights for me are the big item. Obviously, I think a lot of people, again, since COVID, have had more flexibility in their jobs. A lot of people, I have clients who work from home that I still come over and walk their dog, because obviously just because you're working at home doesn't mean you're sitting on the couch with your dog.
Right. Yeah.
So, but I have noticed the overnights have become, that is the hot ticket over here. And I never knew that people wanted that. When I was growing up, we always took our dog to like a boarding place. And with my dogs, thankfully, I always had friends or family nearby that I could be like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm not going to be home tonight. Can I drop my dogs off? So it never dawned on me like what people do when they go out of town and obviously can't take their dogs. So the overnight, and that's been a learning process for me too with the overnights, is not, is if I said yes to all the overnights, I probably would never even stay at my home. I would probably just bounce from one client's house to another, which I think people get the misconception about overnights that I'm not like hanging out at somebody's house. Like there is downtime, obviously. I'm not going to like go with the dog until he passes out at midnight.
Right.
But I'm not there to like hang out and like throw my things about and, use the stove and leave a mess and all that. I don't even, I get too even worked up thinking about using the stove that I don't use the stove. So for me, the overnights are when I leave, I want it to look like I was never there. Mm-hmm. And of course, and I always forget to check the fridge, and I'll have a client, they're like, your coffee creamer's in here. I was like, oh, like, dang it. Forgot the coffee creamer. But the overnights are not like a vacation for me. Mm-hmm. Obviously, yes, again, there's snuggle moments on the couch when we're watching TV at the end of the day or something like that. But the overnight stays, I have found, have been the biggest, at least again, for me, my market, my area, that is what everyone's wanting.
You mentioned the kind of leaving the stay, and Meg and I, we currently don't offer overnights, but we used to. And man, the morning that you're leaving was always super stressful for us because
I'm glad
it's
I'm
like,
the only one.
it's like we'd spend the previous day doing like a pretty deep clean and all the vacuuming and some dusting, and then the morning of, though, it's like, are the sheets done? Are they washed? Are they in the thing? Are they, are the counters wiped down? When was the vacuum? Is the trash taken out? Like, my goodness.
The last 24 hours of an overnight, it's like, I always tell people, I was like, that is like go time. Like you said, you want to get all your things together. And then you want to make sure, like you said, and again, the teenager who rips open the bag and leaves is not going to come in and Swiffer your floors.
No.
Or straighten up the pillows or throw the sheets in the laundry. They're not going to do any of that. So I know what you're talking about with like that you're like, okay, my client's coming home at like 1. So I'll be here until like 11. So I need to get all these things done before then. And you're just like whipping around their house as the dog's staring at you like, oh.
Yeah. I can't right now. I have Febreze to spray.
Right.
Hold on.
Yeah, exactly. But the overnights are, a lot of people who don't do this for a living, they're like, oh, that would be fun, like hanging out at someone's house. I was like, it is fun. I mean, it's part of my job, obviously. It's fun to hang out with a pup. But I'm also not like, I mean, I have a tote that I bring my own coffee maker and coffee things and food and like blankets and pillows and toiletry. Like, I'm basically moving into this person's house.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm like raiding their fridge or anything like that. That's not what I do. And I've heard horror stories about that too, about people coming home and their milk is gone or the whole bag of Cheetos is gone. And I'm like, that's not what I'm there for.
Yeah.
As tempting as it would be to eat your Cheetos, I don't.
Put that on a flyer there, Catherine. Right. I won't eat all your Cheetos. But it is about then, setting those expectations with the clients too, because I know we get some expectations of, well, you're going to stay here 24/7, right? Like you're never going to leave, right? Do you ever get those kind of requests?
I did at the beginning, and that was the one thing that I was automatic no. Like if I did a 24 hours, 24/7 sit, that would also mean putting my personal life on hold. And with the amount of overnights I do, I wouldn't have a personal life if I did that. And also, I have regular clients that I see Monday through Friday for like walks or drop-in visits. So if I did a 24-hour sit, I'd have to cancel on all those regulars. And those regulars, again, have been with me for years. So that was I got a couple of requests for 24/7 care, and I was like, that's not something I'm not interested in. I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just not me.
We had to come up with just like a random price for that kind of care because we got it enough where I was like, I should go ahead and just tell them a price because eventually somebody may say yes to it. And I want to make sure it's worth my time, right? So, but usually when you start saying like that'll be $800 a day, they're like, never mind.
Actually, I think 4 visits a day would be fine.
Yeah, and that's exactly what kind of the intent was, Catherine, of going, no, what you're asking is genuinely worth way more than this, but this is an absurd amount of money, and it helps put into context the value of everything else that we do. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why we did that.
Most people aren't home anyways. You go to your job or you drop the kids off at soccer practice or you go out for dinner. So your dog or your cat or whoever, they're used to people not being home. So, and I get like when you go out of town, kind of that reservation, like, oh, they're going to miss us. And not that, of course, pets miss their family, but you think you need to go over the top or go overboard with them to compensate because you're going to be in Florida for a week when really they're cool. Your dogs are fine at home. They might be a little nervous at the beginning.
Yeah.
But they don't need that 24/7 care. Some might, maybe if they're older or have certain medical issues or something, but That was, I will say that the 24/7 thing was the first thing that I was like, no, not me.
Right, because we got to know those pros and cons. We have to know the opportunity costs of that. Of sure, I may be able to make $50 or whatever, but what am I having to give up for that? Or what? So at the end of the day, is it really worth it? And is that what I want? Is that what do I want more of? And I think I've had to ask myself that question more this year than I have at any point. Is this what I want more of? Is this what I want more of? To try and find that direction forward.
I agree. Yep.
Catherine, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing your story and encouraging others and us to find that personal connection with the clients and lean into those personal relationships, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yes.
I know that I'm immediately thinking of at least 2 more episodes we need to have you back on. So so for those who want to follow along and follow you on social media and see all
as you should
how best can they do that, Catherine?
I'm sorry to say, I used to have Facebook and I have kind of let that go. It's there. It's just Ladybug Pet Care. But I sadly do not post very much on there. But I'm very active on Instagram, and that's also just Ladybug Pet Care.
Yeah, it's very easy to find, and always enjoy seeing everything that you've got going on over there. So I'll make sure that link is in the show notes, so people can click right to that. Awesome. Catherine, this has been just an absolute immense pleasure. I'm very thankful for your time today, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
I love when Catherine said that trust and connection with clients start with being authentic. And first and foremost, we have to be authentic to ourselves. Are you comfortable with who you are? Have you ever just looked at yourself in the mirror with nothing else going on and just stared at yourself for a little bit? It gets uncomfortable after a while. We have to be first comfortable and content and happy with who we are before we can start being authentic and true with other people. It takes being vulnerable, but it has to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves before we can be honest with anybody else. It's a process, and it does take time. Start with the people closest to you who you can trust and build from there. It just takes one step at a time, and it's something worthwhile in the new year. We want to thank today's sponsors, Time to Pet, and the Peaceful Pet Music, Calm Music for Pets on YouTube channel for making today's show possible. And we really want to thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back again soon.